What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, you and I are going to talk about being able to recognize when you actually are making progress or not making progress. So we're going to talk about weight loss, we're going to talk about developing a healthier relationship with food, we're going to talk about building muscle, all of that. But for example, when people are trying to lose weight, often they only focus on the scale. Is the scale going down? But there are many ways to tell if you're actually losing fat outside of the scale, and sometimes the scale will stay the same, but other things will change, and that's how you know it's still working. So in this video, I'm gonna show you what to know or how you'll know if things are working or not, so you can say, you know what, I'm gonna stay the course or I need to make a change. All right, let's get into it. What's going on? All right, so now we are gonna talk about each of these individual categories so you can figure out, is it working or not? Okay, so fat loss, strength and muscle, cardio, and your relationship with food. Basically, I want to help you figure out, are you making progress towards your goal or not? Which might sound a little bit silly, like of course you should know if you're making progress, but a lot of people don't know. They don't know the markers they should be looking for. So I wrote fat loss first because that's like the one that everybody wants to know, but because I want you to watch the whole video, I'm gonna save fat loss for last. So watch the whole video. We're actually gonna start with strength and muscle gain. Now, they're not one and the same. This is really, really important to understand. Strength and muscle, they're very intertwined. If we're looking at sort of like a Venn diagram, I should probably put my phone in my pocket. If we're looking at a Venn diagram, they overlap, but they're not the same thing. You can get stronger without building muscle. Does that make sense? And I'll give you an example. If we look at gymnasts, for example, we look at the best gymnasts in the world, both men and women. They're not jacked, they're not like huge. Yes, they have a lot of muscle, but for the amount of strength that they have, they do not have a tremendous amount of muscle, right? When you think of someone who has a lot of muscle, we think of a professional bodybuilder. We think of someone who steps on stage in a bodybuilding competition. When in reality is like a gymnast is probably pound for pound, not probably, definitively pound for pound, infinitely stronger than a bodybuilder, right? So you can get stronger without getting bigger. We can also look at, for example, like think about figure skaters, right? We look at figure skaters who, let's think about this. Number one, they're almost all super skinny. You don't really see a jacked figure skater. But when we're looking at pairs figure skating, sometimes you'll see someone holding someone over their head. Now keep in mind, they're on fucking ice skates. They're on a slippery surface on a tiny blade balancing. Imagine how hard it is to hold someone over your head, period. Never mind on fucking ice. And also they're smiling. They're like, oh yeah, like this is so easy. The amount of strength that takes is unbelievable, but they're not huge and jacked. And so what's really important to remember is that strength, while muscle plays, oh, I just sort of erased a little bit of it. Well, strength plays a part in muscle growth, it is not the same thing. And what you have to remember about strength is a skill. Strength is something that you get better at individually with the skill of what you're trying to improve. Whereas muscle gain is a little bit different in that you are literally trying to build bigger muscles. So there is a difference there. And so we're gonna separate these two into two different columns, but we're gonna talk about them in the same section. So we're gonna start with strength first. How do you know if you're actually getting stronger? And actually, you know what, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. We're gonna talk about both of these in the same section for 1 second. One of the first questions people will ask me is, how do you know if your workout was effective? People ask me this all the time. Well, how do I know if my workout was effective? And they'll say, well, does it matter if I'm sore? Does it matter if I'm tired? If I'm not sweating after my workout? Like, is that bad? The reality is this. Think about a teacher, someone who's teaching a class of students. How does a teacher know if any one individual lesson was effective? How does that teacher know if that lesson that he or she taught was absorbed well by the students? Well, the teacher probably doesn't really know that in one individual lesson. She might have some ideas. She might have like a thought, okay, well, some of these people weren't paying attention, but some of these kids who really got it, how can I improve it? But she doesn't know until she actually tests them in a quiz or a test format a couple weeks or months down the road. And that's why we have exams, to see how well the teacher did in order to teach the students the actual information. Same thing with workouts. You can't tell from any one individual workout if it was effective or not. The only way if you can tell it was effective is after weeks minimum, but really months of doing it over and over and over again, to then test yourself to see if it actually worked. So with that in mind, when it comes to strength, it doesn't matter if you're sore the day after training or not. It doesn't matter if you're super tired during the workout. It doesn't matter if you're sweating buckets or not. I will say this. If you are never sore from your strength workouts, if you're never sore, like you leave and the next day, the day after, you're never ever sore, odds are you're not pushing yourself hard enough. On the other hand, if you're chronically sore, like you're over the top sore, like constantly it's difficult for you to move, it's difficult for you to get to your next session, you're probably pushing yourself too hard. So we want to find this balance. But what's really important to remember is no individual marker of soreness, of sweat, or heart rate from a strength and muscle perspective is telling you if that workout was effective. Heart rate plays more of a role in cardio, which we'll talk about. But specifically for strength and muscle, how sore you are or are not, how much you sweat or don't sweat, and your heart rate is really irrelevant in regards to your progress. So with that being said, in regard to strength, how do you know if you're getting stronger? Well, you test. And that's really what it comes down to. This is why it's so important to track your progress. You can't just go in the gym, do random fucking workouts, lift random weights, and expect to see progress or expect to know if you're making progress. You have to track it meticulously. Personally, I like the old school writing it in a notebook. I know that really ages me, but like that's what I like to do. I also have the Inner Circle app, which allows you to track all the weights you're using. It automatically tracks the most amount of weight you use for every exercise. So it will tell you if you're hitting a personal record. That way you don't have to think about it anymore. But personally, I like just writing it down in a notebook. Either way, you have to track. So for example, let's say on one day you're doing dumbbell bench presses with 50 pounds and you can do 8 reps. For 3 sets of 8 reps, you're using 50 pounds. And then in 3 months you test and now you can do 10 reps with those 50 pounds. That's progress. That is progress. It might not seem like a lot, and granted, it's not a tremendous amount, but it's working. And this is progressive overload, which we have a whole video on that, right? Don't we?
Yes.
We haven't published it yet. Oh, actually, by the time you see this video, we've published it. So we'll put a link to that video in the description of this about progressive overload and how to use it and how to track that progress. But whether you're increasing the weight, you're doing more reps, something like that is telling you you're making progress, you're getting stronger, you're getting more fit, right? So when it comes to strength, it comes to being as simple as just testing your strength. If you couldn't do 10 push-ups before and now you can do 10 push-ups, you're making progress. If you can lift more weight, you're making progress. If you could only do assisted chin-ups and now you can do 1 full chin-up and then also a couple assisted after that, you're making progress. It comes down to testing. And what's difficult for people to really internalize here is that you can't test every single workout. It's a bad idea. There's 2 different types of workouts. You have building workouts and then you have testing workouts. And what a huge mistake that a lot of people do is they want to test every single workout, or they want to test way too often. What is the most amount of weight I can lift? What is the most amount of weight I can lift? What is the most I can do today? The reality is when you test yourself, you're not increasing your strength. All you're doing is testing what you're capable of doing today. Building workouts are what you should be doing 98% of the time, 99% of the time, and then occasionally testing. And you can test consistently while you're building. Like you can throw out a building workout. If you're building and you're doing, again, those 50s for 8, and then all of a sudden you can do those 50s for 10, well, that's a test right there. But if you want to specifically test your 1 rep max, the most amount of weight you can lift in a squat or a bench press or a deadlift, you should do that at most once every 12 to 16 weeks. The rest of your workouts should be focused on building with a slightly lighter weight for slightly more repetitions to get stronger and build more muscle. And when the majority of your workouts are focused on building and not testing your strength, that way when you do eventually test it, you're gonna be stronger. And that's just how that works. Now, let's talk about muscle. Muscle is different because muscle isn't just talking about strength. It's not just a performance-based metric. Muscle is actually checking, well, how much muscle do you actually have, and is your muscle growing? Are you getting more muscle? Now, we could look at something like a DEXA scan, but realistically, like a DEXA scan, most people don't have access to it. It's not realistic. And personally, I'm not the biggest fan of going out of your way to try and take a DEXA scan. It's like, if you're a bodybuilder and you're competing, great. If you're a regular person like me, like, you don't need to fucking do that. It's a little bit ridiculous. So how can you figure out if you're actually building muscle? Well, number one, you do want to track your strength, because if you are getting stronger, it's a good indicator that you probably are also building muscle, But in order to optimize muscle growth, we have to eat in a caloric surplus. Now, you can build muscle in maintenance or even in deficit if your training is on point and your protein intake is on point, but muscle growth is optimized in a calorie surplus. In the same way that if you and I get into a fight and you bring a gun and I bring a knife, I can win that, like it's possible, but the person with the gun is really optimized to win this fight because you don't need to get close to me. The person who's eating in a calorie surplus is optimized to build muscle, even though they can build muscle in a calorie deficit or in maintenance. So with that being said, the first thing we want to look at is your weight, right? So are you actually gaining weight? If you're building muscle, if you're truly gaining a substantial amount of muscle, the scale's probably gonna go up. It just is, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of people freak out like, oh my God, I don't wanna gain weight. If you're building muscle, it's a good thing to see the scale going up. So you do want to see the scale going up, but it shouldn't be drastically, and this is really important. So basically, when people want to build muscle, you want to optimize muscle growth and you want to minimize fat gain. It is very difficult, I'm not going to say impossible, but very difficult to build muscle without also adding a little bit of fat if you're in a calorie surplus. There's nothing wrong with that. This is one of the reasons why I encourage people before they go into a bulking phase where they're eating more calories, get down to as lean as you can and then go into a calorie surplus so you have more wiggle room. You don't want to be at 40% body fat going into a muscle building phase and eating in a calorie surplus. Ideally, you want to be lower body fat so you have more wiggle room. So you want to track your weight, but generally speaking, anywhere between 1 to 2 pounds a month of weight gain is plenty. You don't need to be adding more than 1 to 2 pounds a month. And you want to be tracking your weight consistently because sometimes it'll spike up. It'll say you went up 4 pounds. Other times it'll go down. It'll say you lost 3 pounds. But the average over months should be 1 to 2 pound a month of weight gain per month so that you can see, okay, cool, I'm building muscle. Now, if you're gaining that weight, but you're not getting stronger, odds are you're not actually building muscle. You should be getting stronger at the same time. So if you're gaining weight but not getting stronger, that's a red flag. If you're gaining a little bit, 1 to 2 pounds a month, and getting stronger, that's a very good sign. Now, we also want to track your clothes and your measurements as well. These are really, really important to track because while you're building muscle in a calorie surplus, your weight will be going up a little bit if you're doing it properly, if you're in a calorie surplus, but your measurements and your clothes should still fit very well. They should still fit very, very well. Now, if you do this for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they will get a little bit tighter, but not so much and so quickly that's like, oh my God, like I can't button my pants anymore. That's not how it should be. In the same way that you should only be adding about 1 to 2 pounds a month on average in terms of weight, the changes in your measurements and in your clothing should be very slight, and month over month, very, very minimal differences. So an easy way to tell if you're adding too much fat and not enough muscle is if your measurements are changing radically, if you're gaining too much circumference around your waist, if your pants aren't fitting well enough, if your clothes are getting too tight in general, that's letting you know you're adding too much fat too quickly and not enough muscle. Now, what's important to keep in mind here, especially in regard to muscle gain, a rate of muscle gain growth is very slow. Like, unless you're on anabolic steroids, and even then, like, it's still slower than most people would want. Generally speaking, I wanna make this very clear. If you're a guy and you're about 18 to 20 years old, and I'm assuming you're natural, you're not using anabolic steroids, okay? If you're a guy about 18 to 20 years old, your natural testosterone is peaked to the highest it's ever gonna be, and your lifting is absolutely perfect, and it's like your first year, so you're getting a whole bunch of newbie gains. The most amount of muscle, so this is like the optimized person, like this is the optimal like scenario. Your stress is super low, you're getting great sleep, you're training super hard, it's like your first year in the gym, you're an 18-year-old dude. This guy, the most amount of muscle he could build in a year is about 25 to 26 pounds. That's like given the optimal scenario. And women would be about half of that. So about like 12 to 13 pounds or so in a year. And that's the first year. And every year after that, you could take about half, cut that in half there and so on and so forth. So if it's your first year of training, if you're a guy, you could expect to, on a really amazing year, if you've got super good genetics and all that and you're not taking steroids, like you could expect to gain about 25 pounds at the most of muscle. For women, about 12 to 13 pounds at the most of muscle. It's excruciatingly slow. So while you might be thinking, well, how can I track this progress? How do I know if it's working? Muscle gain is a slow process. So you do one workout, you didn't build much muscle, if any. You do 4 workouts, so after a whole week, you didn't build that much muscle, if any. It takes time and time and time. So when a lot of people are like, well, how do I know if it's working? How do I know if it's working? Track your strength, track your weight, track your measurements, track your pictures, track your clothes, track all of that. Yes, absolutely. But also understand you've got to do this one thing for like 3 to 4 or 5 months straight before you can really say like, is it actually working? You've got to stay consistent, follow a really good program for an extended period of time, and then you go back and check. And this takes a lot of trust in the process, a lot of just fucking keeping your nose to the grindstone and doing it over and over and over and over again. And you don't get 2 weeks into it and then say, you know what, I'm gonna switch. That's bullshit. If you switch every 2 to 4 weeks, then you're never actually following one program consistently. Follow one program consistently for months on end, then go back and check. And this is why you need to be meticulous with your data tracking. You track your data over a long period of time, but you don't analyze it until at least 1 month, 2 months, 3 months in. So track it every day, but you don't analyze it until you've been doing it for a considerable amount of time. Okay, now we're gonna talk about cardio. How can you tell if your cardio is improving? Well, this is actually, it's much easier than a lot of people would expect. But one thing I wanna call attention to before we get into the measuring different aspects of whether your cardio is improving or not is your heart rate. Heart rate is, I think, one of the most underlooked and underappreciated forms of tracking progress in terms of cardio, not strength and muscle, but in terms of cardio specifically, tracking your heart rate is one of the most important things you can do. And my upbringing in the fitness world, strength and conditioning world, started with strength. It was powerlifting, it was kettlebells, it was not cardio. In fact, most of my upbringing in the industry was demonizing cardio, saying cardio is, you don't need it, you shouldn't do it, it's gonna ruin your gains, blah, 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 blah. And as I've gotten older and researched more, I'm like, wow, that was just so fucking stupid. Cardio is unbelievably important for your health, and tracking your heart rate for cardio is the same as tracking the weights you're using for strength training, right? So when you track your heart rate, and I'm pointing to my watch because I have this Garmin, not sponsored. This is the Garmin Instinct Tactical. I just got it off of Amazon. You're welcome to get it off of there as well. But I really like it. You could use a Garmin, you could use a Whoop, you could use a Fitbit. I don't give a fuck what you use, but I like tracking heart rate. I also will often use one of the polar heart rate straps because those are a little bit more accurate, especially when you're doing higher intensity intervals. But tracking your heart rate, if you don't track your heart rate, that's like not tracking the weights you're using in the gym and expecting to know if you're making progress or not. Tracking your heart rate is absolutely essential to being able to figure out if you're really making progress over the long term. There are other ways to track progress as well, but using your heart rate, it's like you can tell exactly how intensely you're going during that workout, and you can also track it over time. Imagine if you went into the gym and none of the dumbbells had any weights, like you didn't know how much they weighed. You're just like, okay, well, here's one and then here's another one, and you're sort of guessing. That's like what doing cardio without your heart rate is. Like, you're just guessing. So using heart rate, how can you actually track whether or not you're making progress? I'm gonna tell you a little story. I'm gonna give you an example of my own personal experience so that you can understand. So when I first started doing zone 2 training, and if you don't know what zone 2 is, I have 2 very in-depth podcasts on it. I'll put the link in the description of this video if you want to listen to those. When I first started doing zone 2, if I had the treadmill at a speed of 3 with a 0 incline, I was in zone 2, and my heart rate was about 120 beats per minute or so. So speed of 3, 0 incline, my heart rate was around 120 beats per minute. Now, I could be at a speed of 6 with a 0 incline, and I'm in zone 2. So I've literally doubled my speed, but my heart rate has stayed exactly the same. This is a tremendous amount of progress. It would be equivalent to if I was dumbbell bench pressing 30 pounds for 10 reps, and then all of a sudden I could do dumbbell bench press with 60 pounds for 10 reps. That's how crazy that is, and that's how you can track the progress. So if I increase the intensity or I increase the speed of my cardio, but my heart rate is staying the same as it was before, that means the amount of effort that I'm putting in is staying the same, but I can actually go much further and much faster without stressing my body more. So when you're tracking your heart rate, one simple way to do it is, can you do the same speed or intensity, a higher speed or intensity, while keeping your heart rate exactly the same or in the same range? This is a really, really fun way to track your cardio and to track your progress and there are many ways to manipulate it. For example, I said I was at a speed of 3 with a 0 incline. Well, now I can be at a speed of 3 with an incline of 13 and my heart rate is still in zone 2. Which is also very, very cool because the intensity with every incline that goes up, 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 it gets harder and harder and harder and harder, right? So in the same way where if you're doing a decline bench press, it's the easiest. Flat bench press is the middle, and incline bench press is the hardest. The more you incline, the harder it gets. Same thing with on a treadmill. When you're on a flat surface, it's the easiest, or I guess decline would be the easiest, but then on a flat surface is easier, but every incline it gets harder and harder and harder, so it's more stressful on your body, your muscles, your heart, all of that. But if your heart rate can stay the same, it can stay at that lower end range, you're making huge progress because you're now able to do more work at a higher intensity at the same number of beats per minute. So keep that in mind as you're tracking your heart rate. You don't just have to go faster. You don't just have to run your mile faster, even though that is a great form of progress. By tracking your heart rate, you can see how much effort is my body putting into this. And if you're doing it at a higher intensity or at a higher speed, but your heart rate is the same, that is a huge sign of cardiovascular progress. With that said, and before we get to relationship with food, I do want to make it clear, let's say your mile time, I'll give you an example about me. My best mile time right now is a 6-minute flat mile, and I've been trying to break this 6-minute mile for months and months and months, and I haven't been able to break it yet. Now, I have seen progress in other areas of my cardio where for example, I can now do a 13 incline, speed of 3 on the treadmill for 60 minutes and keep in zone 2 the whole time. So my zone 2 has been improving. But that higher intensity trying to break that 6-minute mile has not been improving. So what does that tell me? It tells me that I need to put more focus on breaking this mile time in order to improve that one area of my cardio. It doesn't mean that my cardio hasn't been improving, because it has in zone 2, but my higher intensity cardio, my mile time specifically, has not. So once I can beat that mile time, my cardio has improved. Once I can get to like a 5:59, but really if I could get to a 5:53 mile time, that would be a huge amount of progress for me. That'd be shaving 7 seconds off my mile time, which would be a tremendous amount of progress. So yes, tracking your heart rate is a great tool. If you don't have the funds to track your heart rate, you don't have the means to do that, you can track your distance, you can track your time. There are other things you can track as well. But again, I will say tracking your heart rate is like tracking your weights in the gym, and if you have that option, I strongly recommend it. Okay, now we're gonna get into a big one, relationship with food. This one I'm very excited to talk about because it's so important. I think more people need it than they realize. And a lot of people struggle with their relationship with food and they don't know how to track progress with it. It's far more ambiguous, right? With strength, you can track, you can test. All right, I've built this amount of strength. I'm lifting this much more weight. With cardio, I'm going this much faster. Like, you can track that. With fat loss, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but you can, okay, I've lost 5 pounds. It's very clear. Relationship with food is much more ambiguous. So I'll start by saying this. I have an entire video, a long video, on how to develop a healthier relationship with food. I will put the link to that in the description. Please watch that video. It's gonna give you a lot of good ideas to help you with your relationship with food, deal with sugar cravings, deal with boredom eating, deal with mindless snacking, deal with binge eating, all of that. So please watch that video, link in the description. Now, what I want to talk about first, and really what the majority of this is gonna be based around, is something I said, I think I said this back in 2015. And I remember the first time I posted this on Instagram, it went viral, it went nuts, and it's become a huge staple in regard to how I teach about relationship with food. One person might say no to eating pizza, right? And for that person, saying no to the pizza could be huge amounts of progress. Maybe this person needs to lose a lot of weight in order to improve their health, improve their blood pressure, their cholesterol, their joint health, all of that. And historically, they've had a lot of trouble saying no to these types of foods, right? So for that person, saying no to the pizza could be a huge form of progress with their relationship with food, because maybe they just would uncontrollably eat it once they had it. But for another person, saying yes to the pizza without feeling anxiety, without feeling guilty, without feeling bad, without feeling like they ruined their progress, that could be progress. By saying yes to the pizza, and they can enjoy it, they can have one, they can have 2 slices, whatever it is, and then get right back on track. So we can see that in terms of a relationship with food, you could look at the exact same food, and for 2 different people, for one person saying no to the pizza is progress, and for one person saying yes to the pizza is progress. And this is something that I think goes way overlooked, because when you think about progress, fat loss, strength, muscle, cardio, it's basically all physical. But when we talk about relationship with food, this is mental, and mental progress matters too. Mental progress is a huge component of figuring out, okay, am I winning here? Am I making progress? And I think it's much easier for you and for me, for all of us as individuals, to look at someone else's mental progress and give them the thumbs up and the pat on the back and support and say, I'm so proud of you, that's amazing. But when it comes to yourself, mental progress, we're not our biggest cheerleaders for that. It's easy for us to have this mental gymnastics and say things like, that wasn't a big deal. Like for the person who said no to the pizza, it's easier than to be like, well, I'm still fat. I'm still out of shape. No one wants me still. It's like, yeah, but you said no for this time. Like you did it. That was a huge win there. We need to recognize that. For the person who said yes to the pizza, like, oh my God, it's easier for them to be like, oh my God, I had it. I'm like, I ruined my progress. I'm out of shape. Like, what am I doing? I'm weak, all this stuff. It's like, well, no, you said yes to the pizza. For years, you didn't have anything bad. Like you were at your daughter's birthday party. You had a slice of pizza. You enjoyed it. You enjoyed that birthday party. You enjoyed that moment with your daughter. Cool. It didn't ruin your progress, and we need to get better at recognizing this. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a really unique tool to do this other than you need to be more aware. You need to be more actively and consciously aware of your mental wins, especially when it comes to your relationship with food. So for example, let's say you go out, and this happens a lot. Let's say you go out with some friends and you go to a restaurant. I know for me personally, I used to feel like if I got a salad, for example, when I was out with my friends, I would feel guilty about that because I was like, oh my God, they're gonna feel bad that I'm even having a salad. So I would get something like the cheeseburger or the pizza or whatever, not because I wanted it, but because I wanted to not make them uncomfortable. And so it was a huge amount of progress for me when I got to a point where I was like, fuck that. If I want the salad, then I'm gonna get the salad because that feels good for me, regardless of how it makes them feel, because I'm not responsible for how these people feel, I'm responsible for how I feel. And while we're at this restaurant for 1 or 2 hours, like I wanna make sure that I feel good now and later. So it's really, really important to get very good and make a practice out of analyzing the situation you're in and what you individually need and focusing on what you need. Focusing on what's important for you and then thinking about it for a moment. I remember that the first time I ever deadlifted 300 pounds, I wanted to deadlift 300 pounds for a long time. I wanted to do it for a very, very, very long time. And the first time I did it, I was happy for like maybe 7 seconds. Then I was like, well, now I want 315. Now I want 335. Now I want 350. It's like, I was happy for 7 seconds. I spent years building up to that. And I was happy for what, 7 seconds? Like, what the fuck is that? And I know this isn't necessarily about food, but it's more like, I guess, relationship with yourself and being able to celebrate your own wins and being able to celebrate when you've done something good and being able to congratulate yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you have to gloat to everybody else. It doesn't mean you have to brag about it, make other people feel bad. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but it does mean you have to take a moment and recognize this is progress. In the same way, the scale losing 5 pounds is progress, recognize that. In the same way that adding 20 pounds to your bench press is progress, recognize that. In the same way that beating your mile time is progress, recognizing that. Same here. Whether you say yes to the pizza or no to the pizza, recognize when you're making progress and congratulate yourself and be proud of yourself and use that as an opportunity to say, I'm stacking up wins. Just one more of these, one more of these, one win at a time, one win at a time, because really that's how progress is made. It's not like, usually you don't make huge progress from a massive Hail Mary. You make incredible progress from small little runs. I'm making a football analogy. I don't even watch football. You're like small little runs, a little bit, 5 yards here, 5 yards here, 5 yards here, 5 yards here, 5 yards, and then over years, you make tremendous amount of progress. I'm super proud of myself for making that football analogy. I don't even fucking watch. I don't know who's in the Super Bowl, right? We're filming this the week before the Super Bowl. I don't even know who's in it, and I'm not gonna watch it. But that's how progress is made. Progress is made from little bits, but you have to recognize it. If you don't deliberately go out of your way to recognize when you have a mental win, it's gonna be much easier for you to quit. And when you quit, well, then it doesn't work at all. All right, now for the fun stuff, we're gonna talk about fat loss. Now I saved this for last because I wanted you to watch the whole video. So if you did watch the whole video, thank you, I appreciate it. I also wanted to save it for last because honestly, it's pretty fucking boring. Like, this section is not gonna be like that outrageous. I know this is what most people want to learn about, but odds are you fucking know, and I'm just gonna reiterate it. So here we go. So in terms of fat loss, again, we could go back to the DEXA scan. You could get a DEXA scan. I think that's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea to go out of your way to figure out, okay, have I lost this much body fat percentage? I just don't think it's worth it. I think it's a waste of time. It's gonna get in your head and it becomes obsessive. You just don't need to do that. Tracking your weight is number one, the easiest, most readily available and accurate way if you're actually obviously losing weight, but also losing fat. Now, I have an entire video on weight and scale fluctuations. If you wanna watch that, I'll put the link in the description here so you can learn why the scale fluctuates and how to predict when it fluctuates and understanding if the fluctuations are fat or water or whatever. So I'll put that link here. But tracking your weight consistently over time is gonna show you if you're losing fat. Period, end of story. Now, the other aspects of fat loss to track if you're making progress are pictures and measurements, and also your clothes. So we'll start off with clothes. I personally like to have at least one pair of jeans that are like my testing jeans, right? I know if I, like right now, so these jeans are some of my testing jeans. I've been maintaining the weight loss since my mini cut, no problem, and I can tell because these are pretty fucking loose. When I was at the peak of my weight before my mini cut, like these were tight. And I was like, all right, I need to fucking get my shit together. So just using this one pair of jeans, I knew if I was too far in the range or if I'm on the lower end of the range. And I'm on the lower end of the range right now. So having a pair of clothes, a piece of clothing, whether it's pants or shirt, can be very, very helpful. In terms of tracking your progress, I'm a huge fan of measurements. I think measurements are one of the best, most objective, clear ways to say, all right, is this working or not? Another reason I like measurements is because with weight, your weight will fluctuate. It's not gonna go down every day or even every week or even every month. With measurements, you can measure different parts of your body. And you can see, okay, so I measure my stomach here, I can measure my neck, I can measure my arm, I can measure my leg. You can measure, and from learning this, you can say, okay, so I usually will lose weight from my stomach first, and then I'll go to my legs, then I'll go. You can learn more about the pattern in which your body follows, and everybody's different. Some people, their stomach will be last, their glutes and butts will be first, other people the complete opposite. For me personally, when I gain weight, I really gain it first in my stomach and in my face, but my legs seem like relatively untouched, whereas other people, they gain it all in their legs and nothing in their stomach or their face. So it's very individual, but when you track your measurements, you can really start to learn about yourself so you can know what to expect as you go. In terms of pictures, I think pictures are vitally important, and I know a lot of people hate doing pictures. I'll tell you what I would tell when I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching clients. I don't do it anymore. I just do the inner circle now. But when I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, I would require all of my clients to send me pictures before we started coaching because that's how I can track progress. And they would send me their pictures once a month. So measurements I do once every 2 weeks, pictures I do once every month. And a lot of people would, especially early on, they'd be like, I don't want to send you pictures. And I would have to say, number one, these pictures are for my eyes and your eyes only. No one else is seeing these. Number two is, this is what's really important to remember. If you're nervous to take pictures of yourself, and I've coached thousands of people, I never had someone regret taking pictures when they stuck to the plan and they saw amazing progress. I have had people regret not taking pictures because once they decided to stick to the plan and they started making progress and losing weight, they always say, I wish that I had pictures of myself at the very beginning so I could see the progress now. Same way now, I wish I had videos of me when I first started doing jujitsu so that I could see how fucking awful I was compared to where I am now and I could track this progress. So I don't have those and I wish that I did. Same thing with these pictures. If you're nervous or anxious or ashamed for any reason you don't want to take those pictures, you don't even have to look at them. Take the picture, you don't have to look at them, but have them. Please save them because as you make progress, it will be so helpful and encouraging to watch that and to say wow, this is really working. Now, when it comes to taking pictures, aside from doing it once a month, number one is you don't just want to do it waist up and you don't just want to do it facing the camera. Full body, ideally in underwear, bathing suit, whatever you want, but have one facing the camera, one profile view from each side, it's important, and then one back. And again, you want the full body view. I will never forget when I first realized how important this was because when I first started doing coaching as a teenager, I would get pictures from clients and I only had them do the front. But one of my clients sent me the front, side, and back, and I saw, it was crazy because from the front, he looked basically the same. But when I saw the side, I saw his stomach was going in, and eventually he looked different, but it took about 6 months to see it different in the front view, whereas the side view, it was crazy. You could literally see his stomach was coming in. And I've seen other clients where from the front, you don't really see anything, but in the back, their love handles are going away, their skin folds are decreasing, and it just takes time to see progress in different areas of your body. So if you're only looking at the front view, you might think it's not working, look exactly the same, but if you then zoom out, you see the whole body, you can then say, oh my God, I don't look different here, but I look completely different here. And this is why measurements are so helpful because you can see, all right, I lose from here first, I lose from here second, I gain here first, I gain here second, and then you can see the whole picture when you actually take pictures of yourself. So make sure you get the front, profile, and back view in as minimal clothing as possible so you can really track your progress. So I say weigh daily, take measurements every 2 weeks, and pictures every 4 weeks. And when you do that, you can track your progress over time. And what's actually really important for me to say here is, let's say the scale isn't going down, but measurements are going down. It's working. You don't need to change anything just because you can tell it's working. There are many reasons why the scale might not have gone down in the last month. But if your measurements are going down, you're clearly losing fat. If your measurements are staying the same and the scale is going down, it's working. Keep going. If your weight has stayed the same, measurements have stayed the same, but your pictures and your clothes feel different, it's working. All you need is one of these markers to be going in the direction you want to know it's working. Because there are a million different reasons why something might be lagging or staying behind. But when one of the markers is going in the right direction, it's working. You don't need all of them. Just one of them. And this is why having measurements, having pictures, having your weight, having your clothes, having as many different things available as possible, because when you have 4 different things to choose from and only one of them has to be going the right direction, you're much more likely to see progress. Whereas if you're relying everything on one, just on the scale, well, you're putting yourself at a severe disadvantage. So make sure you're tracking all of those, and as long as one of them is working, the entire thing is working. All right, so now we're gonna announce the 3 people who won a free month in the Inner Circle. If you are new to the channel, by the way, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you don't already, but every video I give 3 free months away to the Inner Circle. I pick 3 people to win 1 free month. So, announcing the ones from the last video, we've got Kelly Scroggin 2547, we've got Alyssa Perone 3697, and then we've got user-ZC3PR7GB6G. I've sent you all individual messages giving you instructions on how to do this. So email me, we'll set you up. give you a free month in the inner circle. With that being said, let's get into the Instagram questions for this video. Okay, here we are. We're answering the Instagram questions. So if you're new here, every single video, we answer 2 questions from Instagram in my Instagram Q&A. So if you're not following me on Instagram, you can do that right here and put one of your questions into my Q&A box, and I will pick 2 of them every single week to answer in this video. So let's get into it. Now, the first question we have here is from Renee Garcia, and she asked, can you explain optimal rest periods between weightlifting sets? Great question. Very nuanced. Like, there could be an entire book just on this one topic. So for the sake of brevity and for the sake of not being overly confusing, I'm going to break it down into basically 2 different categories. There are many categories and there are many subsets of every category, but I'm going to make it as simple and easy to follow as possible. And the first one is really the most important one. The first one is for strength training, and if you want to get stronger, and this also goes for muscle building, if you want to build bigger muscle. The reason this is the most important is because I think these are the most important qualities to build, and I think they're the most overlooked, underappreciated, and done incorrectly. So when we're talking about strength and building muscle, what you're really going to do is you're going to be trying to lift at a higher intensity, and another way of saying that is lifting more weight, lifting heavier weight. Generally speaking, you're talking about rep ranges of 3 on the low end to like 8, maybe 10 on the high end. But 3 to 10 or so is that like strength building repetition range. I know there's a lot of argument around that, but we're going to go with that for this video. If you're trying to lift as heavy as you can for between 3 to 10 repetitions, this is very stressful, both on your body, on your muscles, tendons, ligaments, joints, and also your nervous system. It's very, very stressful. And in order to fully recover so that you can then do your subsequent sets at an equal or higher intensity, or at least a sufficient intensity to continue to get stronger and build muscle, you need enough rest. And a lot of people, especially I've noticed women, really screw this up. Mainly because what I've noticed a lot of women do is they want to get in, they want to get their heart rate up, they want to sweat, they want to feel like they're working. And that's fine for other types of training, which we'll discuss later on. But for strength and muscle, you need to allow yourself to recover. If you're not fully recovering, then you're not going to be able to display as much strength, and you're never going to be able to train your muscles sufficiently to get stronger and become bigger. So, generally speaking, anywhere between 1.5 minutes on the very low end, that's like very low, all the way up to 5 minutes on the very high end, and that's very high. So generally speaking, I would say, let's say you're doing a very heavy deadlift, right? A very, very heavy deadlift for 3 sets of 3. This is a super, super high intensity lift, full body, compound, very stressful on your whole body and nervous system. I would take about 5 minutes rest in between each of these sets for 3 sets of 3 heavy deadlift, max effort deadlifts. On the other hand, let's say I'm doing 3 sets of 10 dumbbell bench press. Well, it's not as intense of a lift. It's not as stressful on my body. It is a little bit higher rep, lower weight. So for this, I would probably personally go for about 2 minutes in between sets. I still think 1.5 minutes would be a little bit too low, but I know there are definitely a lot of people out there who are like, oh my God, just 2 minutes seems like too much. So start with 1.5 minutes. But ideally, I'd like to see you pushing for about 2 minutes because you need that amount of time to fully recover. If you're not taking that amount of time to recover, you're going to be leaving results on the floor. You're not going to be able to get the best results if you don't take enough rest. So if you're trying to get stronger and or you're trying to build more muscle, between 1.5 minutes at the very least to 5 minutes at the very most. Now, let's say you're not trying to build strength or muscle, which is very weird if you're not trying to do that. I think like 99% of people should be trying to get stronger and build muscle. But if you're not and you're more focused on more endurance, then in this case, you don't need as much rest. Now, I will say, because I sort of just made this false dichotomy and I caught myself. If you're trying to build strength early on in your workout, follow that like 1.5 minute to 5 minute rest periods. But later on in your workout, if you're working on more conditioning and endurance, well, now you can reduce the rest periods and you can get both in the same workout. It's not one or the other. So you can be trying to build strength and muscle and also trying to build your endurance, and then that's what's going to alter the rest periods and the weights that you're using. So if I'm wanting to build more endurance and improve my aerobic capacity of my muscles, well, now my repetition range might go from like about 12 on the low end to like 20 to 30 on the high end. And this is going to be more for endurance and for building my aerobic capacity and my conditioning. In that case, with a lighter weight, higher repetition set, my rest periods will be 30 seconds on the very low end, like very, very, very low end, and about a minute and a half on the very, very high end, generally about like 60 to 75 to 90 seconds is a general average that you'll find. And if you're in the inner circle, you see this all the time. You see this in the programs that I write for you. Early on in the workout, usually the rest period's about like 3 minutes in between sets of deadlifts and squats and bench press, things like that. But as the workout goes on, the rest periods will be like 60, 75, 90 seconds between these higher repetition, more aerobic capacity based exercises and workouts. So anywhere from 30 seconds on the low end to 5 minutes on the high end, depending on what your goal is and what you're doing at that point in time. But please, the most important I would say for the strength is for strength and muscle, at least a minute and a half to 5 minutes, and really, really fight the urge to go too quickly, right? So I've noticed women will often cut the rest periods short and men take the rest periods too long. Men will be hanging around for like 15 minutes just doing nothing and talking. It's like, all right, that's way too fucking long between sets. So between minute and a half to 5 minutes for the strength is definitely where the sweet spot is. Okay, now the next question, this is another big one. It's from Nicholas Quirk. Nicholas asked, what are the biggest walls beginners face in the gym? This is a great question. I sort of want to make like a whole YouTube video. Maybe we'll do an entire YouTube video on this, Mitch. If you don't follow Mitch, you can do that right here. Mitch is my amazing videographer, photographer, everything, just an incredible guy. The biggest walls. We could do an entire video easily on this, multiple videos, but I'm just going to talk about one wall right now, like one of the major ones. And I think one of the biggest walls that beginners face in the gym is thinking that other people give a fuck what they are doing and caring way too much about what other people might think about them. Now, I'm not so close-minded and ignorant to think that nobody is looking at you or making fun of you. That might actually be happening. And in fact, it doesn't take a genius to see posts on Instagram of people filming people who are unaware and making fun of them to realize, yes, this does happen in gyms. There are assholes in gyms who will make fun of people who are just trying to get healthier and be fit. And it sucks. Like, that really sucks. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. And if I see someone doing that, I haven't actually seen someone doing it, but if I do see someone doing it, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind and have a conniption, and I will always be on your side. With that being said, those assholes, keep in mind, I've literally never seen this happen in person. I've seen it online. I've never seen it in person. I've been in gyms my entire life, ever since I was 12 years old. I've never seen this happen in person. The reason I say that is because there aren't that many people doing it. The vast majority of the people in the gym are there to support you, and they're happy to see you in there. They're there to encourage you, and they're stoked that you're there. Also, the vast majority of people in the gym are having the exact same concern that you're having. So the concern that you have in that, like, oh my God, everyone's judging me, everyone like can tell I'm a beginner, everyone thinks that I'm stupid, whatever, everybody else thinks that about you. They think that you're judging them. They think that you're looking at them, that you're like maybe staring at them inappropriately, or you're judging them, or you're making fun of them in your head. Everybody is worried about that. And if you think about it, the gym is one of the most insecure places in the world. It's like where people go there. People go to the gym because they're insecure. They are insecure with how they look. They're insecure with how their body looks, with what they're doing. Like, people are there because they're insecure. So keep that in mind, that when you go to the gym, if you're feeling insecure, so is probably everybody else in the gym in some way, shape, or form, regardless of how they look, right? And this is actually, when I have some of my closest friends are huge dudes, big beards, tatted, and they're super strong. And I also know that they're some of the most insecure people. And like they hate that when people feel like they're being judged by them, because that person's like, you're judging me. Like, you think that just based on how I look, I'm judging you. It's like, no, like, I'm insecure as well. Like, I'm here, I'm just trying to get better. And just because I've got a beard and I'm tattooed, and I'm big, you're judging me thinking that I'm judging you. It's like this weird, like, meta, like, I don't know. It's a weird sort of thing that happens. But the truth is, while there are some people, a very small percentage of people who are assholes and who are judging, the vast majority of people are far more focused on themselves and what they're doing than they are focused on you. And this also goes, by the way, for a lot of times people will be staring at somebody. They'll have your eyes on you. And this happens to me a fair amount where someone will be looking at me and then all of a sudden, like, I'll just look back and I'll stare because I feel very comfortable. I feel at home in the gym. So I'll just stare back and smile and all of a sudden they're like, oh, sorry. Like, they weren't really looking at me. Like, they were looking at me, but they weren't really seeing me. They were daydreaming. They weren't really paying attention. And they didn't know that they were making eye contact with me. And I think that happens a lot where people are like, why is that person staring at me? Why is that person staring at me? It's like, they're just daydreaming and they're looking at you just by happenstance because you happen to be there and that's where their eyes are. So there are some creepers, there are some weird people, there are some mean people. They do exist, but the vast majority are not like that. And I'll end with this. Let's say you are unfortunate enough to encounter someone in the gym who is a dick, who is mean and they're judging you and all of that stuff. They're filming you, whatever. Would you be more proud of yourself? Let's say you're 90 years old. When you're 90 years old, will you be more proud that you didn't go to the gym because someone might have been mean to you? Or would you be more proud of yourself for going to the gym regardless of what someone else was thinking or someone else was doing, right? I know 10 out of 10 times the answer is you will be more proud of yourself for doing what you know is right, regardless of what other people are doing, than just avoiding it out of a fear of Joe Fuckstick potentially being there and being an asshole. So I think this is one of the biggest walls that people face. If you want me to make an entire video on the walls that people face and how to overcome them, please leave a comment and let me know. Again, I pick 3 people to win a free month in the Inner Circle every single video. All you have to do is like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a relevant comment. So if you want me to make that video, please let me know. If you have your own walls that you're trying to break down, leave those there so I can address those. The ideas will help a lot. But please, for the love of God, don't let what someone might do or might think prevent you from doing what you know is right and really getting involved and improving your health and your fitness. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you don't already, and I will talk to you very soon.